On today's show, we talk about Connor Bedard's injury, Jesper Wallstedt being called up, and a lot more on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we read down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash, joined by Sebastian High. And on today's show, we'll be talking about Connor Bedard's injury. He suffered a jaw injury. We'll talk about that, how that fares for his season, how he's going to miss the All-Star game, and a couple more things. And then we'll talk in our second segment about some Minnesota Wild's prospects. First and foremost, Jesper Wallstedt, the goaltender, finally getting a call up. We'll talk about his performances in the AHL, what to expect from him in the NHL, and what we do with that moving forward. We'll also talk about Marco Rossi doing really, really well over in Minnesota. And then in our final segment, we'll talk about the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks are on, I think, an 11 regulation win-loss streak, which is not ideal. So we'll give them something to hope for. We'll talk about who San Jose should pick, especially if they don't pick first overall. I think it's really obvious who's getting picked at first, but outside of that, we'll talk about the opportunities that open up. Before I get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started here with Connor Bedard, unfortunately suffering a jaw fracture, I believe, which should keep him out for a considerable amount of time. You know, with jaw injuries, usually it's, a couple weeks of being out, then you come back with a cage. I would not be surprised at all to see Connor Bedard in that particular situation in Chicago. But it's not only Connor Bedard. Nick Foligno broke his finger after that, defending Connor Bedard after that hit. So big blow to Chicago, but a really good thing when you've got a tank going on to lose your best forward by far, right?
I mean, I think that Rem Pitlick is going to at least replace Connor Bedard.
He's going to light it up.
The 7th round draft pick acquisition, who honestly was pretty good in Montreal for a solid year. But it's definitely a blow to Chicago in terms of their likelihood of winning games now in the near future. Definitely a blow to hockey fans overall that he's not going to be available at the All-Star game, or especially considering that it's the format where every player is being drafted into their teams again, which is pretty fun and entertaining. It would have been nice for fans to see Bedard in that setting. But yeah, there's always going to be hurdles, I think, especially for an 18-year-old adapting to NHL hockey. Injuries are going to happen. I remember talking early on this season about point projections for Bedard, and it was always with an asterisk of he's likely going to miss 20-ish games to injury with something, just because he still needs to learn how to protect himself at the NHL level, at the NHL pace, know where the line is. I mean, that takes some trial and error. It was a really big hit. Wasn't a bad hit, but definitely caused some damage there. But no, I mean, Bedard's going to be just fine. I'm not concerned about this changing anything developmentally or in terms of his projection. He's going to be very good when he's back on the ice. He's been by far Chicago's best player in every single game that I've caught so far this season, which is unsurprising, but still a testament to just how skilled he is. But it was definitely a massive hit, and jaw injuries are always not very fun. Even if they're not the hardest ones to recover from, it makes it difficult to even eat food for a couple weeks, right? It's not a fun time.
I'm sure Bedard's not going to like eating through a straw for the next couple of weeks. That's not going to be fun. But at the end of the day, if you're going to have an injury in your rookie season, I think a jaw injury is about as unimpactful as it gets in terms of your overall play, in terms of what it does for your career. Unfortunately, Adam Jiricek in his draft year, just suffering. I'm pretty sure that was a triple triad of just ACL, MCL, meniscus. We don't know the details yet. and we probably
It
won't
was
get him.
really bad.
But the way his leg bent on that, I would not be shocked at all. That
No,
was just, it was
yeah,
awful. It was awful.
yeah,
But yeah, in terms of injuries, I'm glad to see that Bedard is, hasn't been really overwhelmed with big hits and being, lit up for, in center ice or anything like that.
yeah,
It's really just been, this hit being the exception. I think just overall, Bedard's been handling himself very well in the NHL, not just in terms of his play, because obviously we know how skilled he is, but also just knowing how to adapt, knowing how
yeah,
to avoid those scenarios and continue to be impactful on a shift by shift basis for his team. So yeah, overall, I'm not too worried for Bedard's projections in terms of his overall career. It's a jaw injury; he'll get past it. But what I'm thinking is, this will obviously impact his rookie campaign. Depending on
yeah,
how quickly he gets back. There's a lot of players doing really well right now. Adam Fantilli's heating up. Marco Rossi, who we'll talk about in just a second, doing really, really well in Minnesota as well. And Brock Faber just coming out of nowhere and doing so good. Luke Hughes is playing 20 minutes a night, is on pace for like 45 points this season. Like, there are a lot of contenders for this Calder. But I think,
and surprisingly, Logan Cooley isn't one of them.
yeah, it's a shocker because honestly, watching him in the NCAA, he had added so much to his game that I really thought he was going to hit the NHL running.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just been a bit dry on his end, especially lately. He started off pretty good, almost a point a game, and it's kind of tapered off since then. And yeah, we'll need to watch a bit more of Arizona, and kind of try to break that down, see what's going on that side. But overall, like you said, it's not going to be fun for Bedard, but he shouldn't be out for long. But that begs a bigger question. I feel like rookies should probably be wearing cages in their first year in the NHL, just as a precaution. I know players.
Cages are such important measures of protection, like especially when
Yeah.
you're a literal 18-year-old kid coming into the league.
Mhm.
There are far worse ideas than making those mandatory for like U20 players maybe in
Yeah.
the NHL, just because, like, as you mentioned, like Bedard has not been making himself vulnerable to hits at all. Like his scanning habits are excellent. He gets himself into positions where he's very unlikely to get injured, and he still got lit up by a clean but really really big hit in open ice that led to this injury. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think mandatory cages isn't the worst idea, but I think the first focus in terms of equipment at the NHL level is the neck guard.
Oh,
But
yeah, for sure.
yeah,
That's an
one
easy one.
battle at
We'll
a
we'll
time.
we'll work our way towards the cages, that's
Yeah,
for sure. And yeah, I mean, obviously, this is not something a lot of players are this is not a popular opinion. Like, even at the
no,
World Juniors, the under 18 players that go there, it's highly contended whether or not they should be wearing the cage, etc. But like, Macklin
they should.
Celebrini was Canada's best player, and he wore a cage the whole time. Connor Bedard, same thing. I
Yeah,
I don't think it really hinders the player's abilities, and it adds a layer of safety, like you said. So
it's annoying, but it's a safety measure that can maybe not like save lives all the time, but
yeah,
at the very least protect from more serious injuries. That, I
yeah.
mean, in a sport as dangerous and high paced and on knife shoes like hockey, isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely not. But yeah, in terms of the All Star game, I thought I was looking forward to it because I really hope Bedard would pull it kind of Alex Ovechkin, like please pick me last, I want the Honda type thing.
Yeah,
It's unfortunate. It'd be great to start off his career in Chicago with a brand new sparkling car. That would have been great, but it is what it is. But that wraps things up for our first segment about Connor Bedard and the breakdown of his injury and what to expect for him this season. Again, wouldn't be surprised if he's back within 2 weeks. But you can never be too careful with these injuries. Now we're going to get into a couple of Minnesota Wild prospects. First and foremost, Jesper Wallstedt finally gets a call up. The goaltender, one of the best goaltender prospects in the world. And we'll also talk about Marco Rossi, who's doing very, very good at 5-on-5. We'll get into that right after these messages from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
the NFL regular season is wrapping up, and there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed, when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, whether you want to use it for same game parlays or over and unders or spreads. The choice really is yours. I myself am partial to same game parlays, as they can make, especially a game when you're going there live, whether it be for football or hockey or whichever sport you follow, can really heighten the excitement and get you closer to the action. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll talk about a couple Minnesota Wild prospects. First and foremost, Jesper Wallstedt finally getting the call up from Iowa with a couple recent games that, honestly, I'm very surprised by this. He was playing fantastic, was top in the AHL for save percentage up until early December. And then he plays 4 very poor games. He allowed 6 goals on 22 shots on December 20th against Milwaukee. He had a sub 900 save percentage in the other 3 games as well. Some of that gets him a call up. But, we won't complain. We like to see Jesper Wallstedt in the NHL. That's what we've been rooting for this whole time. The 21-year-old goaltender finally gets his chance in the NHL. I'm so excited to see him. I believe this next game from Minnesota, it's already confirmed Marc-Andre Fleury is going to be starting that one. But after that, it opens up a bit. There's a couple back-to-backs. You never know. It'll be very, very interesting to see Wallstedt at this level. But his save percentage has dropped to a 917. Despite those 4 games in which he struggled, he's got a 2.54 goals against average as well in 20 games with Iowa. And like I said, the call-up is going to be very interesting, gives him an opportunity to prove himself. Overall, Jesper Wallstedt has been one of my favorite prospects from the start, and I think we've had a long, lengthy discussions about Wallstedt. I had him in my top 4 in his draft year. I think you had him there as well. We're big
3.
fans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a 3rd overall. I think we've both been massive fans of him for a long time, but
Yep.
yeah, I mean, Philip Gustafsson injury has now freed open that backup goalie slot in Minnesota for him for the short term at the very least, and we'll see how he does. I mean, Minnesota's goaltending has been a bit erratic this season so far, so that door may open up for a more permanent basis if he really impresses. But I'm very excited to see how he's fares at the NHL level, because we've been watching him for three solid years now, since his draft year, maybe even 4, going back to his D-1, and he's finally going to get some NHL action, and it's going to be very exciting because his composure, his reflexes, his mobility and size, he is so athletic but calm and quite methodical in his approach to goaltending. Stylistically, not too different to Carey Price in terms of style, not trying to make that overused comparable in terms of projection, but I think that should help his adaptation to the NHL level, especially after already having a full 1.5 years of AHL experience under his belt now. So hopefully it's a pretty smooth transition, but I'm excited to see how this new generation of high-end goalie prospects kind of fare in the NHL, because we're already seeing Devin Levi play some pretty decent hockey for Buffalo, especially over the last month or so. Dustin Wolf has struggled a bit at the NHL level, but is still playing some excellent AHL hockey, and the same can be said for Yaroslav Askarov. So you're seeing some high-end goalie prospects starting to shove their way into the NHL now, and it's making the goalie scene all the more exciting.
Oh, for sure. The next generation of goalies is here. I think that batch is going to be the 4 or 5 guys that really, just make it really interesting on a nightly basis. Devin Levi especially, Jesper Wallstedt especially. I've had a couple more questions about Askarov. It's been a bit more inconsistent, but he's putting up good numbers. He's kind of plying his trade in the AHL, waiting for his opportunity to kind of shine. So I think
and
that's
he's entertaining as anything.
Oh yeah, he's the most interesting. He's the most entertaining of the bunch. Him and Pyotr Kochetkov are the 2 most entertaining goaltenders. I've heard it a lot. I've heard people say a lot that goalies are cats. Kochetkov and Askarov are the orange cats of goalies. They're just
the orange tabbies.
Yeah, just no half of the time they're just doing something you'd never expect them to do, and just they'll be on top of a cabinet or something, and just what's going on here? But yeah, those 2 are fantastic. I think they're amazing, and the more entertaining a goaltender is, the better it is for the NHL. We need more entertainment, more action. I love that play with Kochetkov where he threw a hit behind the net, and he's what are you doing here, man? I really, it's just so enjoyable to see goalies, express character, especially when Kochetkov went out on Brady Tkachuk on that shootout, and him and Tkachuk got in each other's faces and started yapping because Tkachuk thought that Kochetkov had tripped him and whatever. And it's I love that. It's amazing. But yeah, I think Wallstedt, he's definitely not that. That's not Jesper Wallstedt at all. He's a very calm, very composed goaltender in net. And I see the Carey Price comparisons. They're fully valid. the technical ability, the fluidity, the way he just makes every save seem so easy, and the way he also prevents himself from having to overexert by consistently deflecting pucks into corners and into areas where his teammates can pick them up. I think that's a really apt comparison. Outside of Wallstedt, though, there's a lot going on in Minnesota, rookies wise and prospects wise. We've got Marco Rossi, who's been lighting it up recently. Take it away.
Oh my God, it's so nice to be talking about Marco Rossi again in
Yeah,
such an excited setting rather than a somber one. Like just a tremendous comeback story for him from
yeah.
like the absolute brink with like the worst COVID ever. Right after he was drafted,
Mhm.
and now he's fought his way back not only into an NHL lineup but onto a top line with Kirill Kaprizov, and things are starting to click in Minnesota like they haven't been for the last little bit. And I think a lot of that's been due to that duo like really
Yeah.
clicking and working out so well. Of course, like Brock Faber is playing like 45 minutes every night, which also helps. But yeah. So I mean, the fact that we're having a whole segment here on Minnesota rookies and we're barely going to even mention their Calder candidate in Brock Faber is fun. But yeah, like Marco Rossi has just been superb, and he's doubled down on his style of play. What he's always done so well is what he's doing very, very well right now. And that's what you want from him. It is the intensity. It is the high end hockey IQ. He always knows where he's most valuable on the ice, where he should be, where he can make an impact, create advantages. And he is always open when his teammates need an outlet in transition. He's always buzzing around the slot in the offensive zone, and he's always dropping back deep into the defensive zone to apply pressure on the cycle and to support his defensemen. Like he's a true all rounder, and
Yeah.
he's really starting to come into his own. Like he has 24 points in like 36 games so far this season, which is good, but not perhaps like overwhelming. What is overwhelming is just how much of that production's come at even strength. He is sitting at third in the league in points per 60 at at 5-on-5. Just behind two nobodies by the names of, let me check real quick, William Nylander and Leon Draisaitl, which is not too shabby. He's ahead of everyone else, including the McDavids, the McKinnons, the Matthews of the world. And yeah, that is good. Obviously, per 60 production comes with a grain of salt. He hasn't been seeing as much ice time. There's definitely been some ice time there against lower qualities of competition, and it's only even strength. It doesn't erase his power play value, but it is still really, really impressive as to what he's been able to achieve. And that 5-on-5 value is exactly what he was bringing at the junior level that made him such a special talent in that 2020 NHL draft class. So the fact that he's been able to leverage the exact same toolkit, the exact same like character and work ethic strengths to his NHL game to such a great effect is so heartwarming to see.
100%. I think we were all rooting for Marco Rossi to make it work, and boy, is he ever. It's really impressive to see him go about it. Overall, I mean, you mentioned, the caveats of even strength points per 60, but at the same time, where are the other rookies? Right? I
Yeah,
mean, it's just, he's there, they're not. It's really
yeah,
that simple. Marco Rossi he's always been a monster at 5-on-5. Even, thinking back to his draft year, the footage I watched of him, the games I watched, and the overall package that I saw in Marco Rossi was really just a 5-on-5 monster. He was able to produce on the power play, and he was, especially when, he had Jack Quinn to pass to regularly. But at the same time, like, we're talking about a player who excels in open ice situations, excels when it comes to working the boards hard, getting pucks to the middle. All the little details in Marco Rossi's game were things I gradually learned to fall in love with when I'm scouting prospects. Board to middle is exactly what you need from a player at that age. If they get it at that age, they don't need to learn it later. If they don't get it at that age, they need to learn it, and that's an extra step of development that you have to go through with a prospect like that. Whereas with Rossi, he didn't just understand how to take the pucks from the boards to the middle, but he did it excellently night in and night out. That's also what made me love Zach Benson, and what made me, rank him as high as fourth, fifth overall in his draft year, alongside the likes of Leo Carlson, is because he does that specific thing so well. So yeah, size be damned. Marco Rossi is excellent, and yeah, I'm really, really excited to see him kind of develop into a top 6 forward long term for Minnesota. But that wraps things up for this second segment about the Minnesota Wild's prospects. Now we're going to get into a third segment where we break down a bit of kind of hope at the horizon for San Jose, who have been struggling really, really hard at the NHL level. We'll get into who the San Jose Sharks should pick after these messages from our sponsors over at Jace Medical. If you need to meet your medical needs and don't want to wait and struggle with supply chain issues and a lot more issues that can get in the way of you getting your medication on time, Jace Medical has you covered. Jace Medical is as easy as 1, 2, 3, right on time. All you really need to do is just go online, fill out a form, sometimes talk to one of their licensed specialists, and before you know it, you've got a Jace case in the mail heading your way. The Jace case is a case of 5 life-saving antibiotics, which you can take with you anywhere. If you're someone who likes to travel and someone who gets sick on the road a lot, it's really important to stay ahead of these things and take care of your health. So if a comprehensive solution is what you're looking for in order to stay on top of things medically and take care of you and your loved ones, then Jace Medical has you covered. Get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Check it out. Alrighty, so ending things off with our final segment here, we'll talk about the San Jose Sharks for a second. Unfortunately, the San Jose Sharks are back to a losing streak, 11 regulation losses in a row. It's not going well in San Jose. So let's just give you guys a bit of hope. Let's talk about the 2024 NHL draft and who we think would be the best match for San Jose. I mean, obviously, they're last in the NHL right now. You know, if they get the first overall pick, there's no doubt about it. It's Macklin Celebrini, the best player in the 2024 NHL draft. But the lottery being what it is, you've got what, a 21.5% chance of getting that first overall pick? It's not much. So let's talk about the other options, because after 1, it opens up pretty decently. Looking at the needs of this team, of the San Jose Sharks, in their prospect pool, in terms of the players they're going to have probably in the next 5 or 6 years in their prime, William Eklund, Quentin Musty, Thomas Bordeleau, Daniil Gushchin, you know, there are a decent amount of prospects, Kasper Halttunen, like there's a lot of prospects at forwards. So I think we can take a look at the forwards in a second, but I want to focus on the defensemen that are going to be available in the kind of 2 to 4, 2 to 5 range, and kind of see who would be a realistic fit for San Jose, because on defense, I really like Luca Cagnoni. I really like Matthias Havelid. Outside of that, it gets a bit thin. So what are your thoughts in terms of the 2024 NHL draft's defensemen who the San Jose Sharks could be targeting at the 2024 NHL draft with a 2 to 4 pick?
I mean, the Sharks are in luck. They would not have to like reach into like a lower tier of the draft if they decide to pick a defenseman. Like there are multiple really solid options that would like be fully deserving of a top 3, top 4 selection. So while like we are kind of framing this as like a need and drafting for need, it is because it is such a tight draft class, and like the drop off after 1 is significant. And then there's a whole glut of players that are really in contention, including multiple defensemen. There's a real like luxury of choice here. I think like one of the big obvious names here would be Sam Dickinson. If the Sharks want to add a defenseman to build around as a foundational piece, he would be an attractive one. Quite a traditional, like NHL GM's favorite type of prospect. Really big, really strong defensively, incredibly intelligent in the defensive zone, really, really efficient in how he approaches the game. And he's been unlocking some offensive tools as the year has progressed. And if you go back a year and a half, it was a very different Sam Dickinson, an all-out defensive Sam Dickinson, whereas now you see him as a two-way force in the OHL. So he'd be one really intriguing name, even though perhaps like the raw upside isn't as high with Dickinson as it is with some other contenders in here. Like they could be going for a more diminutive defenseman, for instance, like Zane Parekh or Zeev Buium are kind of in the mix here, who I like a lot, both as a one left shot, one right shot, and the other one would be Artyom Levshunov. So what would you think of those 3 defensemen apart from Dickinson, and how they might be contenders as like, especially if San Jose is picking like 4th overall rather than top 3? How would you feel about that?
Right now, I think Zeev Buium and Zane Parekh have split from the pack of defensemen kind of outside of Sam Dickinson. And, even can be considered in contention with Dickinson in terms of overall kind of skill and
For
upside.
sure.
I just think Dickinson is obviously the better fit. But of those guys, I would go for Zeev Buium. First and foremost is because I really believe in Matthias Havelid and Luca Cagnoni on the right side. I think they're going to be really, really good defensemen at the NHL level. You know, in terms of what Buium brings, we saw it at the World Juniors, especially. This is a player who, throughout the season in the NCAA with Denver, was really focusing on offense. He was pushing, for more of an offensive role. He was cheating on offense and going all out in that element so that he can, fine tune it, add some elements through exploration to his offensive game that would make him a really, really complete offensive player. He has the skill set for it. Fantastic hands, great skating. He can get around the ice very well. Four-way mobility is really solid. His shot is decent as well. He can surprise goaltenders with that as well. And we saw it in the gold medal game. He scored the insurance goal for Team USA with a blast from the top of the right dot. But overall, I mean, the defensive game has really been impressive. He's not the best at entry prevention, but he can still mirror footwork, and once he's in the defensive zone, he's really good at identifying his check and sticking to them really effectively, jumping into scrums with the right timing to get off the boards with the puck. There are a lot of really interesting details in Buium's game that I like. With Parekh, I think you're getting a similar player to Matthias Havelid with more skill, but also more limitations defensively. With a player like that, there's always that risk, especially if you have other pieces in your system that could give your coach more trust than him. So, if Havelid and Parekh make the NHL at the same time, I would not be surprised to see NHL coaches favor Havelid over Parekh consistently when it comes to more ice time. And that limits Parech's upside. Whereas if you take Parekh and put him in a system that is built for him and put him on a team that needs him, then at that point, the sky's the limit. It's just a matter of usage and how much, you have other pieces to rely on. Because once you give Parekh a lot of ice time in the NHL and allow him to adapt and play against top competition, you're going to quickly see what the hype is about with Parekh. He is an insane offensive creator. So yeah, that's my take on the two. I think Buium is a better fit, mainly because he can be paired with Havelid, and that would be a really, really interesting mobile pair of defensemen. Whereas Parekh would have to contend with Havelid on that right side, and that's when things get a bit muddy. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. I think that between Havelid and Parekh, I would be surprised if Havelid were playing more NHL minutes. Even though, yes, he's grown his defensive game in the last year and a half since he was drafted, but he's still an offensive defenseman. He leans offensively, and
Yeah.
I think that Parekh could catch up on that gap between the two in terms of defensive ability. That said, the likelihood that Parekh gets picked top 4, top 3 at the draft is rather low.
High.
We see small defensemen usually drop 10 to 20 slots from where they should go, at least in terms of a skill evaluation rather than projection. But I think one more name I want to add into the discussion. Two more names I want to add into the discussion. One, it would be kind of obvious, maybe Ivan Demidov would make sense, even though the Sharks already have multiple players that play that style. But if you're swinging on raw upside, he would be an obvious choice. And the other one, if you're going for a forward rather than going for need on the blue line, would be Caden Lindstrom, who would bring something that the Sharks don't have really at all in their prospect pool among their forwards, who plays a really heavy game, quite gritty, very physical, but doesn't lead with that. He's very, very skilled and really capable in having a gravitational pull on opponents. He loves to force opponents to kind of get distracted, focus on him only, and then get the puck under their sticks to an open winger at the far side of the offensive zone. Andrew Basha has basically made a career off of that in the WHL so far this season while playing with Lindstrom and other skilled players which ones San Jose already has in their prospect pool, like Will Smith and Quentin Musty and Daniel Gushchin and Thomas Bordelot and William Eklund, of course, would all really benefit from playing with a player like Kane Lindstrom. So there's definitely a luxury of choice here, but whether that is a good thing or perhaps an Achilles heel in this draft class and drafting high remains to be seen. But it's going to be interesting to see who San Jose ends up selecting, because I think if we've established anything in this segment, it's that they have so many options.
Yeah, absolutely. So many. And that's what makes this draft so interesting for San Jose. So even if you don't get the first overall pick, still a lot of really good options to help you help build a winning team long term. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. Make sure to tune in for our next show as we continue our coverage of the 2024 NHL Draft. We'll talk about risers and fallers and a lot more on future shows. So make sure to tune in for that. This has been Hadi Kalikesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.